Serious, dear Edit, has anyone you've known simply disappeared? What's the story? Have you found closure? My cousin disappeared. I found this out after hearing that my aunt, her mom, had hired a private investigator to find her. After a while, I put the pieces together. She didn't have a good relationship with her parents and cut ties with them. My mom managed to find her via Facebook, and her response was basically, "Don't tell my mom how to contact me." When I was in the first semester of my freshman year at college, there was a guy a year older than me in our fraternity who was always around and always made a point of being sociable and getting to know us new guys. He had an apartment with 3 other guys from the fraternity too. Then second semester rolls around and he never shows up, wasn't paying his rent, etc. His landlord even had the police and debt collectors asking for his former roommates and the rest of the fraternity where he went, and none of us know. He had already stopped answering his phone for a long time while we were trying to track him down and eventually disconnected the line completely. Months passed and we just had no idea where he went. We even had a running "where in the world is Carmen Sandiego" joke based off his name. We were still legitimately concerned though, so we all routinely would try to find any trace of him online during our free time, and one day we finally found something. Although he had deleted all social media accounts, his name was listed as a contributor on another school's newspaper for their sports section. We also knew he grew up about 30 minutes away from that school. Finally, through the student directory, we were able to track down a number when one of us called a man claiming to be his dad, but according to the friend that called, it sounded 100% like our missing friend. Was shocked at how little we knew about him changing schools and said he would have his son call us to let us know everything was okay. He did not say anything about the collections agency even though we were asking about it pretty heavily. About a week later that phone line was disconnected as well. My best friend. We only knew each other online when we were both 18-22, but we were inseparable, if that makes sense. Never not in contact despite being an ocean apart. 4 years into our friendship, she states that she's moving to California from New Jersey to see what she can make of herself out there. It was a very fast move. 2 weeks later she was going to the airport and told me she'd talk to me as soon as she had internet out there. But then, nothing. A week goes by, then a month, then 6 months. Now it's almost 8 years. She was never on any social media, didn't reply to emails. Her cell phone was disconnected. Nothing. I actually recently found her mother's Facebook, from which I can piece together that my friend is back in Jersey and has a 6-year-old daughter. I've made 1 or 2 attempts to contact them but with no response, so I'm leaving it. Honestly, that she appears to be safe, happy and surrounded by loving family is enough for me. California is an easy place to get lost in. It can be difficult to find success, particularly coming from the East Coast culture and mindset. My guess would be things were tougher and weirder than she anticipated and she felt like it was her fault. I'd say I'm projecting, but I've seen so many people do this. I'm from Philly and live in SFBTW. My brother disappeared the day after Thanksgiving 2011. He would go weeks couch surfing with his friends and come back. We thought he was doing the same thing until his friends asked us about him. My family and friends did everything to look for him. About a month later there was a news report of a body that was found behind developing stores and my friend sent me the link. The clothes the body was found in resembled my brother's. I called the detective, they came and gathered DNA and confirmed it was him. I really wish he wasn't found and had ran away and started a new life. We never got any answers. They ruled it a suicide but it did not make sense. The detectives and family ransacked the house looking for a suicide note or clues as to what happened to him, but we never found anything. Almost 7 years later and my heart still hurts. One of my mother's cousin went missing on Mother's Day last year. He went to give his mom her present and then went on about his work day. He was last seen getting in his car with 3 guys, acting completely normal. He even waved to the guy who saw him. They looked for months, but only found his car on the other side of the country. 2 freaky things. During one of those long nights they looked for him, his mom and a couple of friends stayed on the front door of their home. A car with a weird old dude they'd never seen before parked in front of them. The man observed them for a while, then drove away. A few months after that, a drunk old dude from the town told the guy's mom that he'd seen him with a bullet in his head before he was thrown in the sea. Then said drunk guy disappeared as well. They still haven't found him. but his mom goes to the beach and drops flowers in the water just in case that was his last resting place. I was told last year that a student at my university who was probably 2 or 3 years behind me disappeared from school one day. His family posted all over social media. Students shared the posts, and the police were involved eventually. They found his cell phone by the side of a highway road near a body of water. Apparently they searched the entire lake, and nothing turned up. He was tormented a lot at school, being socially awkward and always rode to class in his Heelys. Lots of posts about him on Yik Yak and general gossip. To be honest, I completely forgot about this story until I read this thread, and now I have the need to find out what came of that situation. Update. Asked an old college buddy and apparently they never found the kid. His sister still posts ominous things about people going missing on her FB. WTF, Heelys are cool as frick. The parents of a boy in my elementary school class, 2nd grade, were going through a very nasty divorce and he was caught right in the middle of it. Always going back and forth between the two homes, but the parents refused to even see each other, so they made him walk. He told us that part, but we didn't realize until later that he was having to walk over 3 miles each time he got sent off to the other home. My mom found out and we gave him rides a few times, but it was never a set schedule, so unless we saw him walking we didn't know when he needed help. Winter comes. It gets really snowy and he just stops showing up to class. After a few days the school calls his mom, who says he went to live permanently with his dad. They call his dad and he says he went to live permanently with the mom. Neither parent has any idea where he is. The school gets more concerned, but it escalates to the point where none of the students are told what's going on. We knew he ran away, assumed he would have gone to stay at this big field the older kids camped out in sometimes. We wondered if the cold weather killed him. When we asked the teacher if he had died, she told us she couldn't tell us anything and to stop talking about him, which we took to mean he's totally dead. Completely forgot about him as I got older. Every once in a while someone would say remember Paul and we'd talk about it for a few seconds but never dwelt on it. Just figured he was dead. In college I found his picture while looking through a friend's yearbook. Turns out he just went to live with his grandma. I'm glad there was a happy ending. My fiancé disappeared on our wedding day. Woke up that morning and poof, he was gone. He took a duffel bag of his clothes with him, but left everything else behind, including me and his 3-month-old son. His parents didn't know anything about it. After talking with them a couple of times, I discovered that everything he'd ever told me about himself and his family was a lie. 30 years later, I got a Facebook friend request from him and an almost illiterate message about how his dad really wants to know his grandson, who is now a grown man with a life of his own. I told him and his dad to frick off. I raised my son on my own. His family knew where we were and never tried to contact us or offer any kind of support. Last I knew, he was living in Colorado. Good riddance to bad rubbish, as far as I'm concerned. I had a friend once, maybe I still do, kinda hard to say, who was obsessed with the idea of starting over. Every few years or so he would drop everything he was doing, move to another city and start from scratch. While his dad was alive we always had a sort of lifeline to him. Eventually he would talk to his dad, and when he did his dad would tell us where he lived. Now then he would slide back into our lives like nothing happened. At least for a few years until the urge struck him again. Then his dad died. I saw him one more time a few years after that, where I ran into him by chance in another city. We had lunch together, caught up on the basics of life, and he vanished again thereafter. Honestly I doubt I'll see him again, but it is fine really, that is just the way he is. In high school we had this really cool, young priest. One day he just disappeared. We heard he was placed on administrative leave by the diocese. That was it. He was quietly removed from the diocesan website a few months later. Rumors were abound. He got caught doing something shifty and they moved him to another area. He was in jail. He got caught doing something illegal, etc. Years later, with Google a much stronger source of info that hot but was, I gave him a search. Found him in a few minutes and sent him a message on LinkedIn. He caught me up. He had just been ordained and really didn't think he wanted to be a priest. This, coupled with the fact that he had a kind of sort of boyfriend while in seminary, he decided to bounce. The diocese was embarrassed and never spoke of him again. He, meanwhile, went to law school, came out of the closet and was living a few counties away where he, just last year, was elected district attorney. What a series of events. At least he is doing well in life. A coworker told me this story. It happened like 10 years ago. Her daughter had a group of friends. They were just normal teens, all good friends and were enjoying life. Two of them were a couple, again totally normal life. One night they went clubbing. Some of them left earlier than others. The guy also left early, and even though he didn't feel too good about it, he left his girlfriend who said she would come home later. He let her be as there were other people she knew there. Well, she never did. He got a call from her, in which she only said his name. Then she disappeared. A few weeks later he got another call from her, saying that she was fine. At this point she was of course already reported as missing. A month or so went by and the police found her dead not too far from her hometown. No one knows what exactly happened to her or who did it. That was creepy. I had an ESL teacher when I moved here to Canada in grade 5. She was a really nice teacher and very likable. We would go to that ESL class every day at the second period. It was a small class of 5 so it's easily overlooked. We don't even have a classroom. We just use the tables by the cafeteria. One day, she just stopped showing up. The 5 of us would still meet up at the table, but the ESL teacher weren't there. We just used that time to do our homework and assignments. A week passed and the other ESL teacher showed up instead and told us she's no longer with the school and we'll be her students from now on. And she was a nasty teacher. She makes fun of ESL students for their accents. What kind of teacher does that? Years after I graduated from high school, I drove by the elementary school. I decided to see if any of my teachers were there, and I finally found out what happened to the teacher. She had apparently killed herself after her husband cheated and left her. This thread is making my heart all sad. Kind of counts. She was my Facebook friend, through a mutual friend who moved back after school, a young woman in Lahore. She wasn't married and was raising her nephew as her son, as his father. Her brother had died and the mother wasn't in the picture anymore. She was in love with a young man who belonged to a different group of Muslims, but her father refused to let them marry, and if she left without his blessing, he could take her son away, as under Pakistani law. He was the true guardian of both her and the boy. Then her father died. A few days later, she was gone. I tried to find a way to get in touch, but got nowhere. Several years passed and I often thought of her, as she had been a single female who had just lost her guardian. She randomly popped up once, just late last year. I quickly messaged her and we talked for a short while. Her mother died shortly after her dad. She was forced into a family marriage, and she lost custody of her son anyway. She hasn't been back online since and I still think of her. I wish I could help her some way as she is very unhappy. Oh man, this is absolutely heartbreaking. When you said her father died, I was hoping that meant she married the man she wanted to. I hope things are looking up for her now. A girl I'd met at the beginning of a school year, brand new student, didn't come to school the second week. A couple weeks later, she was found dead in a nearby river completely naked. Turns out she'd been kidnapped by her bio father who was pissed at her mother for taking her across the country. Apparently dude is a nut job, which is why they left. He kidnapped her, stripped her, raped her, and dumped her in the river. But here's where it gets really freaky. The weekend before that Monday she didn't show up at school. I was down at said river with a few friends fishing and shooting gatters, invasive species here. The closest natural habitat is just shy of 1,000 miles away. We came across a pile of girls' clothes by the river. Shoes, socks, a skirt, underwear, a top, a bra, and a hairband. We had assumed some kids were getting down and dirty at the river, got caught, and ditched naked. Well, turns out, we'd come across the clothes of that poor girl who was murdered. And if we'd called it in when we found it, her killer could have been caught much faster. He was on the run for months before they finally found him. But if we'd reported it at the time of the finding, it would have been less than 24 hours since she was murdered. Considering it was Saturday afternoon and she had been at school Friday before. I thank God every day though that we didn't have to be the ones to find her body, even though it would save 3 weeks of torture, relatively, for the family. I can't imagine my 17-year-old self finding a dead body and being okay. My dad grew up in the mountains and was recruited to help the local police or his uncle or someone go inspect an airplane crash. He was about 14, and it traumatized him to see those dead bodies. And that wasn't even the result of human malice. It was just an accident. I think you're right that it's a good thing you didn't find that girl. I've posted this before. A friend from high school. Our group was very tight knit, which made it seem more odd, but he just fell off the face of the earth. Nobody has seen or heard from him since a few weeks after graduation, including his girlfriend at the time and family. It's been almost 20 years at this point. My friends and I have occasionally searched social media and arrest reports over the years and never been able to find anything. I don't remember the exact reason for this, but his family eventually filed a missing person report, but it was well over a year later, and if I recall, his parents moved out of town around that time. The whole thing was strange. Trust me, his parents were in on the plan. A guy I was friends with in college disappeared in 2013. We'd never been super close or anything, especially since he eventually left school to pursue other things, so I didn't see him as frequently, but he was one of the genuinely sweetest people I'd ever met. Just gentle and soft spoken and an all around great guy. He'd been backpacking camping on his own near Sedona and just didn't come back. I remember hearing about it on Facebook from a mutual friend, that there were some searches being organized and so on. I don't really remember how long the search went on, just that it was around the holidays and I felt so bad for his family, and eventually it was called off. I think it was almost a year later that his remains were found along with some of his belongings. I don't know if they ever ended up discovering a cause of death. I imagine it'd be hard after a year. I'm glad the people close to him were at least able to get an answer on what happened, but what a heartbreaking situation. My former SO's daughter disappeared several years ago. She and her friend were last seen trying to get someone to buy them alcohol at a 7-Eleven in Phoenix, AZ. Someone gave them a ride somewhere. She went missing on Memorial Day weekend. She was missing until Labor Day, when some bow hunters found some skeletal remains in a dry riverbed. Both of them were identified by dental records. They never solved the crime as far as I know. I don't know how any parent deals with this. A kid I went to high school with disappeared. His parents and friends were looking for him, talking to local news etc. He left his girlfriend's house and vanished. 4 years later, I can't exactly remember, someone spotted a truck submerged in water off a bridge. Turns out, it was on the route he would have taken home and there was no signs of foul play. He just ran off the side before the bridge and must have gotten knocked out on impact. He was there the whole time, and because of a questionable past, his parents were convinced he either ran or was killed by people he paid off or owed money to. It was definite closure for the family and a lot less traumatic than what his mother had been convinced happened, so not all that bad even though he died. R.I.P. Derek. This one is wild. My grandfather was a pilot in the Vietnam War. He flew reconnaissance and was set to go home for his birthday. Another pilot had flown a day earlier and gotten photos of the wrong coordinates, so my grandfather volunteered to fly out and relay the recon on his birthday despite being allowed to go home. He was shot down over some fields. His co-pilot, second longest held prisoner in Vietnam, saw his parachute deploy and that he landed, but then didn't see him again at the camp they took him to. They supposedly found his teeth in the plane wreckage, but it's not real. Here's how we know. Buckle up. His gun is on display in a museum in Vietnam, along with some of his personal belongings. Also, the US claims he was killed in the crash, yet his co-pilot says he landed. My grandfather also spoke Russian and was relatively highly ranked. Because of the Russian presence in Vietnam, we and his co-pilot think he was taken back to Russia. Here's where it gets freaky. My mother was born and raised in Russia, and my dad, said grandfather's son, is from Iowa. My dad studied Russian in college, studied abroad and eventually moved there to work in his 20s. He was in a meeting in the Kremlin one day when a general of the Russian army kept eyeing him and eventually approached him. The general asked him if he was the son of my grandfather. He said he knew him and knew what happened to him after Vietnam, but that he couldn't say anything at the time because it was an insecure location. He gave my father his card and told him to call him the next day to meet. The general was mysteriously killed in a car crash later that day. We still don't know where my grandpa is. Most likely dead, but we just want to know what happened. Russia is a mysterious country. Lately the news makes sense. Also, you should write a story about your grandfather. He is a famous personality as far as what I can make out of your story. My dad's friend always talked of the Grand Canyon and how bad he wanted to see it. He disappeared and my dad got a package in the mail almost a year later with pics and a suicide note. He ended up taking his van to the Grand Canyon from Florida and decided to kill himself there. My HS boyfriend went missing in February 1997 from his college. We were no longer a couple but stayed close friends and he called me from college all the time. He was last seen at class on a Friday and simply vanished. Nothing was disturbed or missing from his dorm. The college did not tell his parents until 7 days after his last known sighting and were not cooperative in any investigation. When people were visiting the school as potential applicants, they were told he was found and home safe. He wasn't. He was missing. It was awful. His family basically moved up there, a few states away, to search for him non-stop to no avail. 9 months after he went missing, a boot washes up on a beach not far from the college with a foot and leg in it. It took almost 6 months to confirm it as his leg. His other remains were never found. There has been so much speculation about what happened. His mom received calls from a person at the college who would not it herself that told her the college knows more than they are saying. The lead investigator eventually killed himself and nothing had been resolved. It's been speculated his former roommate killed him. That he killed himself. No way in my opinion. Or it was an accident. I've come to realize I will never ever know what happened to my friend. Holy frick. I am sorry for you to have gone through this with someone close. This is the spookiest one in the thread if you ask me. The no-id phone call. The school knows more than they are telling. I didn't know you could get face goosebumps. I was a missing person sort of. I've always had a weird family situation where I went between fosters and my dad's side of the family. They always saw me as a burden, but I lived my aunt until I was 16 when I left school and her family. I couch surfed with friends for a while before drifting. One of the few blood relatives I got along with was my younger cousin who was 11 or so when I left. I eventually made my way to Mississippi where I worked under the table jobs and lived in a really shoddy car I had bought for a couple $100. A few years go by and I decide to go back because I sort of missed my hometown, but I didn't plan on seeing my family. I got a job as an exterminator, got a girlfriend and we started living together with me working while she went to college. Anyways, no contact with anyone I had known in the past. One day I was at the mall before Valentine's looking to get my girlfriend a present when out of nowhere someone's holding me and I turn around. It's my cousin. I hardly recognized him, but it was him. He was in puberty and was a foot taller than when I last saw him, so it was strange to say the least. He started bawling his eyes out right there in the mall and could hardly get his words out. Eventually he calmed down when we went to the food court and he told me that my aunt would never tell him what happened to me and that some of the more cruel members of the family said I ran away and died from drugs or something. He said that he had always really liked me because I was like an older brother to him and that it had really hurt him when I left because he thought he would never see me again. We meet up every now and then, but I still haven't met with the rest of the family. He hasn't told them I'm back either since he told me that they have not really acted like they cared since I left. Wow, this one actually made me cry. My best friend's little sister disappeared for a while at the age of 16. We all assumed that she had ran away, since she just one of those kids, but her mom were extremely worried and kept looking for her. To be honest, we expected it to happen as she was rebelling from her parents and assumed she was staying with a friend from school since she didn't know many people. A week or two later the police tracked her phone to an apartment complex and raided the place just to find her. She had run away, but was quickly kidnapped and being prepped for a sex trafficking ring. Unfortunately, our city has some of the most human trafficking activity in the US. Something that many residents here don't know. Had her mom not been so worried and put pressure on law enforcement, she may have soon been transported elsewhere and the chance of getting her back would have been extremely low. Their family is going through the healing process and it's been about 2 years since it happened. They didn't catch everyone involved, but I think she named a few local men who were. Although she went through a horrific trauma, I think they understand how lucky they and used it as a dialogue to bring awareness to a major issue so that people can protect themselves. Prepped for sex trafficking. I don't even want to know what that entails. My 27-year-old brother disappeared in 1969. I was 11. Our family was camping in Northern California not far from Bishop. He went off with his fishing pole and never returned. When he hadn't returned at dinner time, my mom contacted the sheriff. The sheriff's department put up searchlights so he could possibly find his way back in the darkness. They searched and never found him or any of his belongings. In the late 1990s I was in the area and went to the Inyo County Sheriff's Department and updated the missing persons report. My parents have passed away. In case he or his remains ever turned up, I wanted them to have a way to contact me. They called the next day to get more information about the clothing he was wearing at the time of his disappearance. Apparently they had some unidentified remains. I provided the information and it was not him. He is still missing. Friend told me this story. When he was younger he moved to a new city. At his new school the only person that talked to him was a really quiet weird kid. That kid turned out to be a pretty big time weed dealer and my friend and him went into business together. His parents completely knew and supported his lifestyle, saying that they would go to jail for him if they had to. Crazy stuff. For like 15-year-olds. They moved a pretty significant amount of weight, picking up QPPs and reselling to high school kids. At the time it was before legalization and bud was much more expensive for the area, so they turned a decent profit. Anyways, after a while of things going good and the two becoming good friends, the dealer starts becoming paranoid, talking about being watched and crap. One day, he didn't show up to school. My friend walked to his house after school and it was completely empty. No furniture anywhere. No cars in the driveway. Completely ghosted. He never heard from him again, and it's going on like 7-8 years now. Probably got tipped off that the net was closing in and dipped before they got caught. My teammate a few months ago just disappeared one day. We're all in high school and he was getting super into drinking and such and started hitting his dad. Out of control guy. One day he just disappeared and my friend got a text from the dad saying thanks for being the last one to hang with him before he left us, and obviously that freaked my friend out, but the parents wouldn't give out any info. Cut to 109 days later. Actually a few days ago, my other friend gets a call from him, acting all casual when no one has seen him in 109 days. He says that his mom paid 2 huge black guys to kidnap him and they brought him to wilderness therapy program in Utah. Apparently it was just him and 4 other guys in the woods for that whole time. He seems to have his act together now and he can also make fire with his bare hands. Quite interesting. OMG, I know a good number of people who have done the wilderness therapy in Utah thing. It's strangely common. Glad he's alright. Friend of mine from middle and high school just disappeared one day. He did a lot of drugs so most people just acted like oh well, that's just what happens. He hit on somebody's girlfriend at a party the night before he disappeared. A guy known for being a hothead and not exactly a law-abiding citizen himself. We're pretty sure he killed Tommy, but evidence is only circumstantial and it was almost 10 years ago. I tried to find information on my friend, just trying to find answers. Nothing. His long abandoned Facebook profile with its never changing picture from FLCL and the memories of myself and a small handful of others that knew him are the only evidence that he ever existed. I used to work at this cafe in Boston, and one of our favorite regulars was this guy Pierre. He was a chill dude, came in a lot to work on his laptop. Unlike some regulars who act like they owned the place and we had to humor them, everyone genuinely liked Pierre. He was the only customer who was welcome to hang out in the kitchen and talk. Once, after I stopped working there, he tackled some sickhead who was half-assedly trying to rob the place. He was the easiest guy in the world to talk to, but he kept his life super private. It was a neighborhood with lots of bars and we frequently invited and urged him to come out with us, but he never did. He was an attractive, well-spoken, well-dressed guy and sometimes we would try to set him up with a lady but he never went for it. No one knew much about the dude except that he'd gone to Harvard and did work on his laptop in the cafe. He did talk to me a couple times about growing up poor and black in bumfuck Texas. He had a sense of humor about it. He clearly did well for himself and had gotten himself out of poverty and Texas, but he evaded questions about how HR had gotten to where he was in life and what he did for work. Everyone knew that's just how he was. No one pushed him. At some point he moved into a house with a co-worker of mine, which surprised me given how careful he had been to keep his private life private. No one who lived there ever figured out what he did for work either, but by then it was just kinda like a Chandler Bing situation on that. Anyway, about 8 months into the lease, the guy disappears. Just never shows back up at the house, and all his stuff is still there. The roommates looked through the room for clues and found a ton of different licenses and passports with Pierre's picture on them but fake names. He also had like 6 laptops, none of which he took with him. I assume they contacted the police. He simply never came back. Somehow, it felt like something Pierre would do. Not all the fake IDs but the disappearing act. FBI or CIA or something maybe. My older brother. He left almost 6 years ago and no one has heard of him since. I tried to find information about him, but there is nothing to be found. Even his closest friends have no idea where he went. After years I've come to understand that he left because he was abused by our parents. All 3 of us were, but my brain didn't want to accept this reality. Probably a survival mechanism. Protecting myself from the harsh truth. I hold no grudge against him that he just left and never said goodbye, but I do miss him terribly. If he never wanted to talk to me again, I'd understand. I just wish I knew what happened to him. If he is happy and living a good life, I so hope he is happy, wherever he is now. I hope so too. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.